Welcome to the Impact in Charlotte podcast, where we believe you need to show up to go up, grow yourself to grow your business and your community. In each episode, we highlight a member of IIS Charlotte, share their story, and talk impact. Today's guest is Tim Baier, co-founder of Spiracle Media, former journalist. Welcome, Tim. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave. It's great to be on with you.
Yeah, well, so in each episode we start out by talking entrepreneurship. You started out as a journalist here in the Charlotte area. I know we've talked to Jared, who is the other co-founder, and he has a similar story. But kind of give us your side of it. What led you into the entrepreneurial world?
Yeah, I think we got to the point that we were working in sports journalism here in Charlotte, and really wanted to find a way to stay in Charlotte. The thing with working in journalism, local television, is you have to jump around markets in order to grow. And so when we got to the point of, living in Charlotte, having been here for about 7 years, I didn't want to leave. And so Jared and I were roommates with 3 other guys. We had sort of like an old school house over in Wesley Heights. And we would sit up at night having a beer and sort of trying to think about, what is next? What can we do to be able to stay here, use what we know, but then also, build a business or do something along those lines. We were all over the map trying to come up with ideas. And that's when Spiracle and the idea of Spiracle Media came about. And it's been sort of really fun since then. We've gone through ups and downs. We've gone through pivots. We started out as a social media company doing websites, social media, and video for professional athletes. And then we pivoted probably back in about 2013 to all video storytelling for businesses, nonprofits, and universities. And that's what we've been doing since then. And now we have a team of about 15 here in South End, and really enjoying the entrepreneurial trip. I think, we just didn't know what we were getting into, if I'm being honest. And it's been really fun to sort of learn along the way and figure it out as we've gone.
Yeah, so you talked about pivoting, you talked about kind of, as you got into it, it was a social media company for professional athletes. Now it's kind of moved. How do you know as an entrepreneur when to make those pivots? I know, for most entrepreneurs, 2020 was an interesting year. If we can, be that or what that year actually was. But how do you kind of get into that shift? Like, how do you know when to pivot? How have you been able to kind of continue to grow and move the business over the years?
Well, there's a couple things going on with us. So when working with professional athletes, you have to work with their agents, which we weren't the biggest fans of. It was a tough relationship because the agents looked at it as a way that we were taking money out of their pocket. And so that relationship was contentious from the beginning, and that made it difficult to work with more and more pro athletes. I think secondarily, we had a number of different companies that we were working with running their social media, doing community management and those kind of things. And one of our biggest clients switched back to an agency they had been working with before. And that sort of also worked as a catalyst for us to make that pivot. I think, when we came out of that meeting, we were, a little butthurt, I think would be the way to put it. But at the same time, we dusted ourselves off and we decided what we needed to do. And we made that pivot. And we really looked at hiring journalists to come in and tell stories for businesses. And that's really what changed everything for us and really helped us grow and helped us get to where we are today.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about the role of storytelling for businesses. I mean, obviously, now with with the digital age, there's no shortage of places to kind of get your word out, or there's so much pressure to be kind of out there, whether that's social media or YouTube, visual and digital, right? Like, there's so much opportunity to connect with consumers. Talk about kind of the role of storytelling and why that matters.
Yeah, it's sort of the hot word right now, storytelling. Most businesses are starting to uncover that or get into that space. I think where we look at it is, it's always been the case that people are attracted to stories. They're attracted to the characters in those stories. They're attracted to the drama that occurs during those stories. And every single business has a story, whether it's around their product, whether it's around their people and their culture that they've built. There are just a lot of different ways to slice a story. And the other piece of the puzzle is that we're talking about, an audience now in the consumers that are much more educated than they ever were. And advertising straight to them with ads just doesn't necessarily cut the cake anymore. And where we're at now is people also are tied to those stories, and they get pulled in to a company. They get pulled into the why and what people are doing. And so that's what I think the most important piece has been for us as we've continued to tell stories for businesses, is figuring out the why, who the audience you're trying to attract, and how are we going to be able to tell a story that's compelling to them and that brings them along for the journey that you've been on as a company.
Yeah, that's great. Seth Godin refers to this as the connection economy. Mm-hmm. People want to have a relationship with the companies that they utilize, right? So there's so many great stories out there about a company, believing in something, or I think of like Southwest Airlines stories, or, stories of even, local restaurants that, really stand up for, like sustainable food. And it's like people want to connect to something beyond just the product itself, right? Like storytelling isn't about like, hey, our product is the best product, you should buy it because of the product. It's, hey, here's what we believe, that why piece. So kind of just to piggyback off that a little bit, when you're telling those stories and you're building those connections with the audience, what's one of your favorite stories you've gotten to tell over the last year?
Ooh, that's a tough one. We've done a number of different stories. There's been so many this year because of what's been going on. Obviously, the ups and downs, the roller coaster. I think the partner that we've worked with a lot through this year, and they've probably gone through the most transition, is the YMCA of Greater Charlotte. They had to really transform things overnight. When they had to close down all of their gyms, obviously, all of the spaces that the communities come to, and then they immediately flipped over and decided to become free daycare for first responders, people that had to go to the hospitals, that had to work in doctors' offices, that people that were helping throughout the pandemic. And what the YMCA did was they quickly stood up these opportunities in these places for kids to be able to come and be safe, be healthy, but then also not be left behind. And so telling that story was probably one of the most, engaging ones that I've seen that our team has pulled off, just because it's pretty amazing what they were able to do in such a short amount of time. The other piece that I'll sort of spotlight is we did a series called 6 Feet Apart. And it was, when we were in the shutdown, pandemic mode in March into April, people just didn't want to shoot video together. They were really worried. A lot of people were sitting on their hands about trying to figure out what they were going to do going forward. Uncertainty was the name of the day, or the name of the game. But we did a series called 6 Feet Apart, and we spotlighted businesses in the Charlotte community that were giving back and finding ways to help. So it was everything from, hand sanitizer, from vodka distillery, all the way to Five Guys was taking burgers at lunch to all of the hospitals and feeding first responder workers. So we were able to really dig into those stories and tell them in a different way than we had been able to tell in a long time. And it really gave our team that, that sort of buzz of being able to be back in the mix and being able to share what was some really good things that were happening in the Charlotte community.
Yeah, those are really great stories. In some ways, like you talked about, like you all as entrepreneurs had to make a pivot in your company. This year just felt like one giant, pivot. So being able to capture those stories and tell those stories, I think is really important. If you had to give advice to an entrepreneur who was thinking about, hey, I'd really love to do video, digital storytelling, like I don't really know what to do, or what's the best way to do that? Like, how would you kind of coach someone into moving into that realm, right? Like to being able to tell their story either through video or digital?
I mean, I think it's a lot like most companies when they're starting out. You want to get a minimal viable product. You can do something that at least gets you over the hump, and make something that looks good with the tools that are available today to everyday people. You can get something that looks really good and be able to tell an honest story without having to hire somebody like us or work with a lot of different marketing people or those kind of things. I think where you really want to jump in is you really have to be just open to digging into what your story actually is and what you're really trying to share with your audience. Sometimes your audience is going to be the people that are buying your product or service. sometimes your audience is going to be the new employees that you're trying to recruit and bring in. And dependent on that audience, that's dependent on the story you want to tell. But I just think that people have the tendency to get caught up in technology or, those kind of hurdles that they have to get over. But just like you and I right now are sitting here being able to do video and a conversation and everything like that, it's pretty easy now with the amount of technology we have in our hands, in our phones, in our computers, that, really just working on telling your story, you can refine it over time. But just jumping in with both feet and giving it a try is I think the first thing that you got to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. Something you mentioned that I think is interesting is, just kind of getting into it. But you talked a little bit about like people focus on the technology, they're focusing on the video side of it, which really is the tactic, right?
Right.
What you kind of kept pulling back to is like, it's about just telling the story. And then, you can get into quality, you can get into production, and you can get into those things to tell the story better or, in different platforms or more effectively, et cetera. But, with just the kind of push towards the story is what matters. That's the strategy. That's the why. That's the part to really build from. And I think that's really, really helpful advice and really powerful way to think about it. I want to shift gears just a little bit. We kind of started talking about like, how did you get into your entrepreneurial journey? What did that look like? You talked a little bit about pivoting, but I want to talk about, as an entrepreneur, as a small business owner, as somebody who, has 15 employees and, people that you're responsible for. That's a lot of weight. There's a lot that comes with that, right? Like there's a lot of learning, there's a lot of growth. So talk a little bit about just kind of how you've been able to kind of connect to a community that's helped you as a business leader, and talk a little bit about kind of just what that's meant to you.
Yeah, I think, you do feel a little bit like you're on an island sometimes when you're a business owner. You're making decisions at a rapid pace that you don't always know what the outcome is going to be. And so you have to take all of the information you have in your hands and be able to make the best educated decision you can make at that time. What I will say is I'm blessed that I have a business partner in Jared that, we work really well together in a yin and yang situation where maybe I'll have some crazy idea. He'll bring me back down to earth and be like, okay, here's how we could actually execute something like that. And maybe he gets caught up in some of the nuance of something. And I'm like, let's think big picture here. So we really work well together in that way. And so that's been really good for me. But then on top of that, getting outside of our own world and being able to talk to other business owners is really, really valuable. I mean, it's invaluable to us because of all of the ways that people have been able to go through some of the same exact experiences you have. They might not be exact to the detail, but they've gone through those situations. And to be able to sit there and say, okay, here's what I'm facing. And they don't sit there and tell you, well, this is what you should do. They say, well, when I was in that situation, this is what I went through. And that experience share is ultra valuable. And I think that, when you're out there in a business owner, sometimes you can feel like you're on an island. When you have a community like that, where you have other like-minded business owners, it's really, really valuable. I think I could say valuable like 9 more times there in that answer.
Well, it is. It's true, right? It's true because it's valuable. It's good.
It is.
So what, give me an example maybe of, just some really good advice you got either early or recently or kind of, whenever it happened, but what's some, really good business advice that you've received?
I think we've gotten, the classic ones, hire slow, fire fast, those kind of things. But I think when you get into real concrete situations, or maybe even it's like, okay, here's the benefits I'm thinking about offering for my employees, and I want to make sure that they're well taken care of. What's a good partner to work with in that situation? Who can help me find that? Those kind of things and those connections and those warm introductions make a huge difference. I'm not Googling, benefits and employees and how to take care of them. I'm actually talking to someone that's done it with 10 other businesses recently and knows exactly what's working and what is, valued by the employee, but also beneficial to the company. So those kind of things, I think it's really the knowledge base that people have, having gone through different experiences, the people that they've met and the connections that they can help you with. That's where I've seen some real value.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I mean, I love what you shared about, in some ways, you talk about Spiracle Media as a storytelling company, but business leaders telling stories to each other is also the way we learn, right? It's the way we talked about, like, folks not necessarily saying like, here's what you have to do and you need to follow this 3-step plan. It's more like, well, here's what I did when it happened, and here's some things we thought about. When I think about leading a company, or I think about business, there's so many different paths you can take. There's no like, well, this is the one way that works for everybody all the time. If it was, that would be the best all the time. But there's just a lot of nuance. There's a lot of decisions to make. There's a lot of things that it's really hard to know, the answer. So that storytelling, even in a community, kind of is where the learning comes from. So yeah, hey, thanks for your time. I want to give you kind of the 30 seconds at the end. You can talk about whatever you want to talk about. You can do a pitch for Spiracle Media. You can talk about, you were a sports journalist. I'm sure you're following, kind of what's going on in the sports world these days. The floor is yours, sir.
All right, man. That's intimidating. I think the pitch I'll make today is, we're looking for some new talent to bring into the team. Some of the best video producers, video shooters, editors, those people that are out there that are extremely talented and know what they're doing and have had experience and are looking for an environment where it's fun, it's a team, we work on some really big opportunities. I think that would be the big pitch I'd want to make with my 30 seconds, is to help us try and find those best talented videographers or video storytellers that are out there. If anybody knows any, please hit me up either on Twitter, Instagram, email, any of those places. Please definitely reach out, because I think as we continue to build, we're coming off of a really strong finish to 2020, even though the beginning half was crazy. I think 2020 looks really strong, and we're going to look to build this team even more. And so that's what I would ask of the community that's out there watching.
That's awesome. Well, and I know that you all, over the last few years at Spiracle, have received, you can help me kind of make sure I'm saying this right, but you've received kind of the Great Places to Work award. I don't know the specifics of it, but I know that obviously Spiracle is kind of continually seen as a great place to work. And so you've got a great office culture. You've got a great team. So definitely worth joining. Thanks, Tim, for joining us today. Appreciate your time. I'm going to wrap us up here. Thanks to our guest. Join us next week. We will be back here at Tuesday at 4:15. Thanks for listening to the Impact in Charlotte podcast, where we believe you need to show up to go up, grow yourself, to grow your business and your community. If you want to learn more about II Charlotte, you can visit iicharlotte.com. And remember that impact begins with II. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.